Long ago, in a land known as Judah, during a time filled with uncertainty, change, and hidden struggles, there lived a man named Isaiah. His life began in an era when God's people were divided into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. This division was not just political, it reflected deeper spiritual issues among the people. As written in the opening of his book, Isaiah's story unfolds during the reigns of kings Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, rulers of Judah, who each brought their own influence and challenges to the nation. From a young age, Isaiah grew up in Jerusalem, a city deeply significant to God's people, a place where worship, tradition, and identity were rooted. He was not just an observer of life, but a deep thinker, someone who paid attention to what others ignored. He saw how people lived, how they treated one another, and more importantly, how far many had drifted from God's truth. While others celebrated outward success, Isaiah sensed something was wrong beneath the surface. During the early years of his life, King Uzziah ruled Judah, and for a time the kingdom prospered. The land flourished, the army was strong, and cities expanded with impressive growth. People felt secure. Everything seemed stable. But Isaiah saw beyond appearances. He noticed that even in times of prosperity, the hearts of the people were slowly turning away from God. Wealth was increasing, but so was inequality. The rich grew richer, while the poor were pushed aside. Justice was being ignored. Greed began replacing compassion. Isaiah would later speak boldly against this injustice, warning those who accumulated land and wealth at the expense of others. He understood something many refused to accept. Success without righteousness is empty in the eyes of God. But it wasn't just social injustice that troubled him. Even more painful was the spiritual decline. People began worshiping false gods, turning away from the one who had rescued their ancestors from Egypt. Idolatry spread quietly but powerfully. Isaiah watched as hearts drifted, and it grieved him deeply. At the same time, danger was rising beyond their borders. The powerful empire of Assyria was expanding aggressively, threatening nearby nations. Fear began to spread among the people of Judah. Many started looking for protection not in God, but in political alliances. They believed making deals with other nations would save them. But Isaiah knew the truth. Trusting in human strength instead of God would only lead to destruction. He saw clearly that the people were searching for security in the wrong places, and it troubled him deeply. Then, one day, everything changed. In a moment that would define his entire life, Isaiah entered the temple, the sacred place of worship, and there something extraordinary happened. He had a vision so powerful, so overwhelming that it shook him to his core. He saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne surrounded by glory so great that it filled the entire temple. The presence of God was not something distant or abstract anymore. It was real, alive, and overwhelming. Above the throne were heavenly beings called seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And they called out continuously, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is filled with His glory." Their voices were so powerful that the very foundations of the temple shook and the place filled with smoke. Isaiah stood there, terrified, overwhelmed, completely undone. Because in that moment, he didn't just see God's greatness, he saw his own unworthiness. He realized how sinful he was, not just him, but the entire people around him. Standing in the presence of perfect holiness made him aware of everything broken within him, and he cried out in fear, "Woe to me! I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." He believed he was finished, that he could not survive such a holy encounter. But God's intention was not to destroy him, it was to transform him. One of the seraphim flew to him, holding a burning coal taken from the altar. The angel touched Isaiah's lips with it, a moment that must have been intense, even painful, but deeply symbolic. Your guilt is taken away, your sin is forgiven. In that instant, everything changed. Isaiah was no longer defined by his past. He was cleansed, restored, made ready. And then came the moment that would shape his destiny forever. Isaiah heard the voice of God asking, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" God was looking for someone, not someone perfect, but someone willing. And without hesitation, without fear, Isaiah responded, "Here am I, send me." That single response changed history, because Isaiah didn't know how difficult the mission would be. He didn't know the rejection he would face. He didn't know the weight of the messages he would carry. But he said, yes. And sometimes that's all God is looking for, a willing heart. God then gave Isaiah a challenging mission. He was told to speak to people who would hear but not understand, see but not perceive. It was a mission that required strength, patience, and unwavering faith. Isaiah even asked, "How long, Lord?" And God's answer revealed that difficult times were ahead. Cities would fall, people would suffer, but even in that warning, there was hope. A remnant would remain. A future would still exist. God's plan was not destruction, it was restoration. From that moment forward, Isaiah stepped into his calling. He became God's voice in a world that often refused to listen. He would speak to kings, challenge leaders, defend the weak, and remind people of the truth they had forgotten. His journey would not be easy, but it would be powerful. And through him, God would continue to speak, not just to that generation, but to every generation after, including you. Because the message of Isaiah is not just history, it's a reminder. A reminder that even when the world looks strong on the outside, something deeper may be broken within. A reminder that God still calls people today, and a reminder that one yes can change everything. And now, before we continue to the next part of this powerful story, if you feel something stirring inside you right now, if this message touched your heart even a little, then don't ignore it. Take a moment, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below, "Here am I." Because just like Isaiah, God may be calling you too. After that life-changing encounter in the temple, Isaiah did not return to an ordinary life. There was no going back to who he once was. The vision he had seen, the voice he had heard, and the cleansing he had experienced marked the beginning of a new path, a path that would demand courage, truth, and unwavering faith. Isaiah stepped into his calling as a prophet of God. From the very beginning, his mission was not easy. One of the first major challenges he faced was confronting idolatry that had spread throughout Judah. Everywhere he looked, people were bowing down to statues, worshiping things made by their own hands. These idols had no life, no power, no truth, yet the people trusted them more than the living God. This broke Isaiah's heart. He boldly spoke out, warning the people that this path would lead them away from God's protection. He reminded them again and again that there is only one true God, the same God who had delivered their ancestors, guided them through hardship, and made a covenant with them. But idolatry was only part of the problem. there was also deep injustice in society. The rich were exploiting the poor, the powerful were taking advantage of the weak. Leaders who were supposed to protect the people were instead crushing them. Isaiah did not stay silent about this. He spoke with boldness and fire, declaring that God sees everything and he cares deeply about justice. He called out the leaders, exposing their corruption. He described how they had filled their homes with what they had taken from the poor. He questioned them directly, asking how they could treat people this way and still claim to follow God. Isaiah made it clear, true faith is not just about rituals or appearances, it is about how you treat others. He called the people to repent, not just in words, but in action. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, stop doing wrong, learn to do right. He urged them to defend the oppressed, to care for orphans, to stand up for widows, those who had no voice in society. Because in God's eyes, true worship is not just what happens in a temple, it's what happens in everyday life. But alongside these calls for repentance came strong warnings. Isaiah used powerful imagery to explain what was happening. He spoke of a vineyard, carefully planted, protected, and nurtured. God had done everything possible to help it grow, but instead of producing good fruit, it produced bad fruit. This vineyard represented the people of Judah. God had given them everything, guidance, protection, blessing, but they were not living the way they were meant to. And Isaiah warned them, if they did not change, consequences would come. The vineyard would be left unprotected. It would be destroyed. This was not just a message of anger, it was a call to wake up. While Isaiah was delivering these messages to the people, he was also called to speak directly to kings. One of the most significant moments came during the reign of King Ahaz. At that time, Judah faced a serious threat. Two powerful kingdoms, Syria and Israel, had joined forces and were preparing to attack Jerusalem. Fear spread quickly. The king and the people were shaken like trees in a storm. It was in this moment of crisis that God sent Isaiah to speak to the king. Isaiah approached Ahaz with a message that seemed simple but required deep faith. Be careful, stay calm, do not be afraid. He told the king that these enemies, as powerful as they seemed, would not succeed. But there was a condition. Ahaz needed to trust God. Not his army, not alliances, not human strength, God. But Ahaz struggled with this. Even when God offered him a sign, any sign at all, to prove his promise, Ahaz refused. He pretended to be humble, saying he would not test God. But in reality, he had already made up his mind. He chose not to trust. And it was in this moment that Isaiah spoke one of the most powerful prophecies ever recorded, a prophecy that would echo through history, a prophecy about hope. He declared that a child would be born, a son, and his name would be called Emmanuel, meaning God with us. At that time, the message was a sign of reassurance, but its full meaning would unfold generations later, because this was pointing to something far greater, a future where God himself would come near. Years passed, and Isaiah continued his mission during the reign of another king, Hezekiah. Unlike Ahaz, Hezekiah tried to follow God, but even he faced moments of crisis. At one point, Hezekiah became seriously ill, so ill that Isaiah came to him with a message that no one wants to hear. Put your house in order, you will not recover. It seemed like the end, but Hezekiah did something powerful. He turned to God. He prayed with all his heart, and God heard him. God saw his tears. God responded. Isaiah returned with a new message, one of life instead of death. God promised to heal him. Not only that, but he would add 15 more years to his life and protect Jerusalem from its enemies. To confirm this promise, something extraordinary happened. The shadow of the sun, something that always moves forward, moved backward. Time itself seemed to reverse. It was a sign,
a reminder that nothing is impossible for God. During Hezekiah's reign, another major issue arose: the threat of Assyria. This powerful empire continued to grow, and fear once again filled the hearts of the people. Many leaders suggested forming an alliance with Egypt for protection. It seemed logical, it seemed wise, but Isaiah warned strongly against it. He declared that trusting in human power instead of God would only lead to more trouble. He reminded them that armies and horses may look strong, but they are nothing compared to the power of God. Again and again, Isaiah repeated the same truth. Do not look to the world for your security, look to God. And when Assyria finally came against Judah, something incredible happened. Instead of relying on alliances, Hezekiah prayed, and God delivered them, not through human strength, but through divine power. Through all these events, healing, miracles, warnings, and victories, Isaiah continued to show the people one central truth: God is in control. Not kings, not nations, not circumstances. God. And his messages were not only for that time, they were for every generation, even today, because the same struggles still exist. People still trust in the wrong things, still chase security in temporary places, still forget where true strength comes from. But Isaiah's voice echoes across time, reminding us, trust in God, even when it doesn't make sense, even when fear is loud, even when the world tells you otherwise, because God is still the same. And now, let me ask you something. Are you trusting in something that cannot truly save you, or are you trusting in God? If this message is speaking to you right now, don't scroll past it. Pause for a moment. Jesus is calling hearts even today. So take a step, like this video, subscribe for more messages that strengthen your faith, and in the comments, write, I trust God. Because your words matter, your faith matters, and your journey is not over yet.
As Isaiah's journey continued, his message began to reach far beyond the borders of Judah. What started as warnings and guidance for his own people slowly expanded into something much greater, a declaration that God is not only the God of one nation, but the God of all nations. Isaiah began delivering powerful messages, often called oracles, about surrounding kingdoms. These were not random warnings. They carried a deep truth. No empire, no matter how strong, stands above God. One of the most striking messages was about Babylon, a rising power at the time. To many, Babylon looked unstoppable. Its influence was growing, its strength undeniable. But Isaiah saw something others could not. He saw its fall. He declared that one day Babylon, despite all its power, would be brought down. God would raise other forces against it, proving that even the mightiest kingdoms are temporary in the hands of the eternal God. This message was important, not just as prophecy, but as a reminder. Power does not equal permanence. Isaiah also spoke about Egypt, a nation known for its strength, history, and influence. He described a time when Egypt would face internal chaos, fear, and collapse. Its idols would tremble, its people would lose confidence. But here's what made Isaiah's message different. Even in judgment, there was hope. He said that Egypt would not be destroyed forever. One day, they too would turn to God, and God would heal them. This reveals something powerful about God's character. His goal is not destruction. It is restoration. Isaiah continued speaking about other nations, Moab, Damascus, Tyre, each receiving a message that their actions had consequences. Some would fall quickly, others would fade slowly, but the message remained consistent. God sees everything. God rules over everything, and no nation escapes accountability. But beyond these specific prophecies, Isaiah introduced a much larger idea, something known as the Day of the Lord. This was not just about one nation or one moment.
It was about a future time when God would step in fully to set everything right. A day when pride would be brought low, when injustice would be corrected, when everything that stands against truth would fall. For those who rejected God, this day would be terrifying. But for those who trusted Him, this day would be a day of hope. Because this meant pain, injustice, and evil would not last forever. And this is where Isaiah's message begins to shift from warning to something incredibly beautiful: hope. In one of his most powerful visions, Isaiah spoke about a future king, a ruler who would come from the family line of David. Not an ordinary king, not one driven by power or pride, but one filled with the Spirit of God. A ruler of wisdom, a ruler of justice, a ruler of peace. This was not just leadership, this was transformation. And then Isaiah painted a picture, one so peaceful, so unexpected, that it almost feels impossible. He described a world where natural enemies would live together in harmony, where a wolf would dwell with a lamb, where a child would lead powerful animals without fear, where nothing would harm or destroy. This was not just poetry, this was a vision of complete peace. A world restored to what it was always meant to be, a world where fear no longer exists, because God's presence fills everything. But perhaps one of the most powerful and emotional parts of Isaiah's message comes in what he revealed about a coming servant, a figure who would not arrive in glory, but in suffering. Isaiah described someone who would carry the pain of others, someone who would be rejected, wounded, and crushed, not for his own wrongdoing, but for the sins of others. A servant who would take on suffering so that others could be healed. This message is deeply powerful because it reveals something unexpected about God's plan. Salvation would come through sacrifice. Healing would come through pain, and victory would come through what looked like defeat. Isaiah's words here are not just prophecy, they are a glimpse into the heart of redemption. And as his visions continued, they became even more beautiful. He spoke of a future where God would prepare a great feast, not just for one group of people, but for all nations. A celebration filled with joy, unity, and abundance. And in that moment, death itself would be destroyed. Tears would be wiped away. Pain would no longer exist. This is not just hope for one generation. This is hope for all humanity. Isaiah also spoke of something even greater, a new heaven and a new earth, a complete renewal of everything, where the past pains are forgotten, where joy replaces sorrow, where everything broken is made new. This is the ultimate promise. God is not just fixing the world, He is recreating it. And in this new reality, there is no fear, no injustice, no suffering. Only peace, only joy, only God's presence. But Isaiah didn't just speak about the future in distant terms. He also delivered messages of comfort for those going through pain. He spoke to people who would face exile, loss, and uncertainty. And through him, God said, "Comfort, comfort my people." These words were not just gentle, they were powerful. They were a reminder that even in the darkest moments, God has not forgotten His people. He described God like a shepherd, tender, caring, protective, holding the weak close, guiding those who are struggling. This image is deeply personal because it shows that God is not distant. He is near. He cares. He leads with love. And then comes one of the most comforting promises. "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." Think about that. Called by name, known, loved, chosen. Isaiah reminds us that no matter what we go through, whether it feels like deep waters or consuming fire, God is with us. Not watching from a distance, but walking beside us, protecting us. carrying us. He even revealed that God would use unexpected people, foreign kings, unknown leaders to fulfill his plans. This shows something powerful. God can use anyone, at any time, in any way, to accomplish his purpose. Nothing is outside his control. And as Isaiah continued, his message became a song of joy, a declaration that one day everything will be restored, that even the driest places, like deserts, will bloom with life, that joy will replace sorrow, that peace will replace chaos, that God will do something new, something unexpected, something beautiful. And now, let this question sit in your heart for a moment. Do you believe God can still do something new in your life, even after everything you've been through? Because Isaiah's message says, he can, he will, if you trust him. So if this message is touching your heart right now, don't ignore it. This might not be coincidence. This might be your moment. Take a step of faith, because sometimes your words are the beginning of your transformation.
As Isaiah's life moved toward its later years, his mission did not become easier, but it became even more powerful. Because by this point, Isaiah was no longer just a messenger. He was a voice that could not be ignored, a voice that carried truth in a world that often preferred comfort over reality. But one of the greatest challenges Isaiah faced was not from enemies outside, it was from people within. There were false prophets, voices that spoke what people wanted to hear instead of what they needed to hear. They told comforting lies. They promised peace where there was no peace. They avoided truth because truth was uncomfortable. And the people loved it. They didn't want correction. They didn't want conviction. They wanted reassurance, even if it wasn't real. Isaiah stood completely opposite to that. He spoke truth, even when it was rejected, even when it was unpopular, even when it cost him everything. People would say, "Stop telling us what is right. Tell us pleasant things." But Isaiah refused, because he understood something deeply. Truth may be hard, but it leads to life. Lies may feel good, but they lead to destruction. And standing for truth in a world that rejects it requires courage. Isaiah had that courage. God even asked Isaiah to perform symbolic actions, things that would grab people's attention in ways words alone could not. One of the most shocking moments was when Isaiah walked barefoot and stripped of his outer garment for a period of time. It wasn't for attention, it was a sign, a warning about what would happen to nations who trusted in the wrong things. This act must have been humiliating, difficult, uncomfortable, but Isaiah obeyed, because his mission was bigger than his comfort. And that's something many people struggle with even today. Following God is not always comfortable, but it is always meaningful. Again and again, Isaiah confronted leaders who chose political alliances over trust in God. He warned them clearly that relying on human power would fail, that strength built on fear would collapse. Yet despite the warnings, many still refused to listen. And still, Isaiah continued. He did not quit. He did not water down the message. He stayed faithful. Because his confidence was not in people's response, it was in God's truth, and that is what made him powerful. Because real faith is not proven when everything is easy, it is proven when everything is difficult and you still stand firm. As Isaiah's journey reached its final stages, his messages became some of the most beautiful and hope-filled words ever spoken. He began to speak more clearly about the coming Anointed One, a figure who would bring good news to the poor, healing to the brokenhearted, freedom to captives, and light to those living in darkness. This message was not just prophecy, it was a promise that no matter how broken the world becomes, God will intervene.
God will restore, God will redeem. Isaiah also saw visions of something beyond anything the world had ever known. A new heaven, a new earth, a reality where pain no longer exists, where no one weeps, where injustice disappears, where death itself is gone. This was not just imagination, this was God's final plan. A future where everything wrong is made right. Isaiah described a world filled with joy, a place where people build, plant, live, and rejoice without fear of loss, a place where peace is not temporary, but eternal. And in this vision, Isaiah reminds us of something powerful. What we see now is not the end of the story. No matter how broken things feel, there is something greater ahead. He also spoke about restoration, that Jerusalem, once broken, once destroyed, would rise again, that people from all nations would come together, not in conflict, but in worship, that God's light would shine so brightly that darkness could not overcome it. And then comes one of the most powerful invitations ever spoken. Come, all who are thirsty, come to the waters. It is an invitation without price, without condition, without limitation, an invitation to receive what truly satisfies. Because the truth is, people spend their lives chasing things that never fulfill them. Success, money, approval, temporary happiness. But Isaiah reminds us, only God satisfies the soul. Only God fills the emptiness. Only God gives life that lasts. And he ends with a powerful reminder of God's eternal promise, and everlasting covenant, unbreakable love, faithfulness that never ends. Even after all the warnings, even after all the failures of the people, God's final message is not rejection, it is love, it is hope, it is restoration. And that is what makes Isaiah's story so powerful, because it reflects something we all face: struggle, failure, doubt, distraction, but also grace, purpose, calling, and hope. Isaiah's life teaches us that you don't have to be perfect to be used by God. You just have to be willing. Willing to say, "Here I am." Willing to stand for truth, willing to trust even when it's hard. And now, this story is no longer just about Isaiah, it's about you. Because the same God who called Isaiah still calls today. The same God who forgave Isaiah still forgives today. The same God who gave Isaiah purpose still gives purpose today. So the question is, will you respond, or will you ignore the call? Because moments like this don't come again and again. Sometimes this is your moment. Before you leave, if this message spoke to your heart even a little, don't just move on, take action. Because faith is not just something you feel, it's something you respond to. So right now, like this video, subscribe for more powerful faith-based content, and in the comments, write, "Here I am, Lord." Because your voice matters, your step matters, and your journey with God is just beginning.
And even after everything Isaiah had seen, after all the visions, the warnings, the miracles, the rejection, and the hope, there is still one truth that stands above everything else. God never stopped reaching out. Not once. Even when people ignored him, even when they turned away, even when they chose idols over truth, God continued to speak. And that tells us something powerful. God does not give up easily. Not on nations, not on people, and not on you. Because if you really look at Isaiah's story closely, it's not just about prophecy, it's about persistence, God's persistence. Again and again, through Isaiah, God was saying, "Come back, return to me, trust me." And even when judgment was spoken, it was never the end. It was always followed by hope. Because God's correction is not meant to destroy you, it's meant to restore you. And maybe that's something you needed to hear today.
Because sometimes life feels like everything is falling apart, like things are not going your way, like prayers are unanswered, like silence has replaced direction. But Isaiah's message reminds us, God is still working, even in silence. Even when you don't see movement, God is preparing something. Even when things feel delayed, God is not late. And even when you feel distant, God is not far. Because the same God who spoke through Isaiah still speaks today. Not always through visions, not always through prophets, but through moments, through conviction, that quiet voice inside you that says, "Don't give up. Keep going. Trust me." And here's something even deeper. Isaiah didn't just speak to people. He stood between God and people. He carried truth from heaven to earth. And in many ways, his story points forward to something greater, to someone greater. Because everything Isaiah spoke about, the peace, the restoration, the healing, the Savior, it all leads to one name, Jesus Christ. The one who would come not just to speak truth, but to become the truth. The one who would not just warn about sin, but take it upon himself. The one who would not just promise hope, but be the hope. And this is where Isaiah's message becomes personal, because it's not just about what happened back then, it's about what is happening right now, in your life. Because maybe you're in a season of confusion, or fear, or waiting, or even failure. And you're wondering, where is God in all this? Isaiah answers that question. God is still there, still watching, still guiding, still calling. But the real question is, are you listening? Because just like in Isaiah's time, there are still many voices today, some loud, some convincing, some comfortable, but not all true. And if you're not careful, you can follow the wrong voice. That's why Isaiah's story matters, because it teaches us to recognize truth even when it's not easy, to follow God even when it's not popular, and to stay faithful even when it's not rewarded immediately. Because in the end, faith is not about results, it's about trust. And trust is built in moments like this. Right now, as you're listening, as you're feeling something inside you, that pull, that thought, that quiet nudge, that's not random. That's not coincidence. That could be God calling you. Just like he called Isaiah, not because you're perfect, but because you're willing. And if there's even a small part of you that feels that right now, don't ignore it, because one response could change everything. Isaiah said, "Here I am, send me." And that one sentence turned his life into a mission. So what about you? What will your response be? Before you scroll, before you move on, take a moment. This is your pause, your chance. If this message spoke to you, even a little, do something about it. Like this video. Heart. Subscribe to stay connected to messages that build your faith. Bell. And in the comments, write, "I'm ready, God." No pressure, no performance, just honesty. Because sometimes that's where everything begins. And if no one has told you this today, you are not alone, you are not forgotten, and your story is not over. God is still writing it.